Yes. So, good evening, all. This is the 14th Alumni G-Meet talk we are having today from the 2014 batch Ramya. A very nice title. Now, apart from the biography that I have shared through email, what I want to specifically emphasize is Ramya has taken up higher studies, in fact, a direct PhD at IIT Madras, and this is most of the talk that we are having after starting this alumni meet. That someone who has taken up higher studies in the core field in India is coming forward to share her life experience and how she coached up herself and prepared herself for the higher education in India. So my specific request is all the current students should make use of this opportunity to know from Ramya not only how the rheology flows in her topic, but also on what are the perspectives of higher education in India. Maybe typically what a typical IIT PhD life will look like. It need not be specific to IIT Madras, but I think in general all IIT PhD scholars will have a roughly similar kind of life. So you can get to know from her how much grit and determination is required to take up higher education and how lucrative is higher education in India. Thank you, Ramya, for coming forward to talk and also share your knowledge on the concept of rheology to the current students. You can start. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, so
if you have a presentation, you can put, or otherwise you can talk live.
Yeah, so I have a presentation for both my the two different sections of my talk. So firstly, Naren sir, I need to really thank you for this initiative because I can see it's a very important initiative because back then when we had started out, we had no clue what to do. But now this kind of an initiative will give a lot of insights to the current students, and I hope will help them make better choices for them. Okay, so with this, I'll enter the talk. So what I'll do right now is share my screen.
Yes, you can share.
Okay, and I hope my PPT has come here, right?
It will come. Yeah, it is presenting.
It has come, right? Okay, so now I'll go to slideshow mode. So what I'm doing right now is I'm completely looking at only my PPT. If somebody wants to ask me questions, how do we do this?
In the chat box, they can ask.
Okay, so I need to keep coming back to that.
Or otherwise, later on also, you can finish your presentation maybe by, you can give half an hour for interactions.
Right. Okay. Hello everyone. So what I'll do right now is give a very small introduction on my field. I won't be presenting my work because that would take a lot of time. So I'll just introduce the field and tell you why exactly I am telling everything flows. And then I'll also give some philosophical aspect to it. Then I'll stop. We can ask some we can have interactions on on this technical session. After that, I'll give a small glimpse on opportunities in India in terms of higher studies. Okay, so we'll move on with the talk. So this is the title that says everything flows. And if you see, there is an animation there, and this is something that I have actually taken from Wikipedia. If you go and browse viscosity in Wikipedia, you will actually get this. And I think that particular simulation is also self-explanatory. Okay, so we'll begin with materials that's already known to all of you and equations of which you're already solving or have solved during your bachelor's. That is elastic solids and viscous liquids. So I probably need not explain what are elastic solids and viscous liquids. So elastic solids are systems that exhibit a stress proportional to the deformation that you apply, while viscous liquids are systems that exhibit a stress proportional to the rate of deformation that you apply. Apart from Newtonian fluids, we also know that there are fluids that deviate from a Newtonian assumption that do not follow Newton's law of viscosity and fall into the category of non-Newtonian fluids. Okay, so the simple explanation for an elastic solid would be to think of that system as a spring that can store energy, and the stress is proportional to the deformation that you give or the strain. The simple assumption for a viscous liquid would be that the material is similar to a dashpot that can dissipate energy, and its stress is proportional to the rate of deformation. So the materials that belong to elastic solid category are all these materials that you see on screen: bricks or rods or metals or wood, etc. While viscous liquids are something that we use in everyday life, such as water, milk, oil, juice, and all of that. Apart from that, if you look at some of the material systems in real life, which are much more commonly used, they are not simple Newtonian fluids or simple elastic materials, but they have some complex responses, and I'll show you how. So I'll give you example of 3 videos. I hope I can, yeah, I hope you people, all of you can see. I'll just check this. Yeah, can all of you see
Yeah,
this? Yeah,
it is playing.
playing. Okay. So these materials look like liquids. For example, if you take paints or toothpaste, or let's say take any cream, cosmetic cream, they look like liquids, but they actually have elastic behavior. And these 3 videos will tell you how. So if you take, let's say, the case of a toothpaste, this is something that you always see. This is called as a dye swell. And why does this happen? This happens because you can assume these systems as let's say chains that are coiled, and when they are under deformation, that is when you squeeze the tube, these chains actually relax, and the moment they come out of the system, because of the ability to store energy, they are known to behave like elastic systems. Now, the second effect is something that also most of you would have seen. So this is called as rod climbing effect. So when what you actually see is that apart from shear stresses developed in a system, there are also normal stresses because of which this material eventually climbs the rod. And the third effect is also something that is very commonly seen, which is you try to make it flow, and when you stop the flow, bring it back to its state, you see that they come back to their initial state. Because in spite of all of these three looking like Newtonian fluids, they can actually store energy like elastic solids, and that is why they are called as viscoelastic systems. So the most real systems that you come across in everyday life are both viscous as well as elastic. Such systems are usually represented by a combination of spring and dashpot. Is that clear? Now
Yeah,
let us
you continue.
yeah. Now let us go to systems that actually look like solids but exhibit viscous behavior. That is, let's say, the case of dry sand. As you can see, the cat walks in, and basically the cat goes inside like what you would see when you would jump into water. That is because, in spite of the sand behaving like a solid, it has the ability to dissipate energy, and therefore it has a viscous behavior. Similar is the case with sand dunes. And these kind of patterns that you see on sand, they come because the sand can easily be eroded by wind in those areas. And that essentially tells you that these can also flow. And then are these cement slurries that we see while road constructions are being done. You can see that they are all having a lot of solids in them, but they can be easily casted and made to flow like liquids. And in the same category are rocket propellant suspensions as well. They look like loaded particle systems, but they actually behave like non-Newtonian systems. And then are the common systems that you see in everyday life, the dough that you can see. They look very solid like, but when you try to smash them, they can easily take shapes of whatever you're trying to give them. And so are these clay materials with which you can make pottery. And all these basically tell you that in spite of them looking like solids, they can have viscous behavior. And so such systems can also be represented by a combination of spring and dashpot, just that the spring will have a greater domination than the dashpot. And therefore, these are called as viscoelastic solid-like systems, unlike the case for the earlier one, where they are called as viscoelastic liquid-like. Because these are liquids but have elastic behavior, so they have stronger contribution from dashpot. And because these are solids having viscous behavior and have stronger contributions from the spring. I hope this is clear. So the most realistic systems that we see in everyday life are not just Newtonian or not just elastic, but they are viscoelastic. And Also, if you look at certain systems, for example, take the case of silly putty or the DIY slimes that you see in YouTube videos. If you take these slimes, make them into balls, and if you, let's say, throw them hard, you would see that they'll bounce back like a rubber ball, indicating that they are solid like. But if you put them in a container and just don't disturb them, let them sit there, they'll essentially take the shape of the container like a liquid. And how is that possible that the same material can in one case behave like a solid and in one case behave like a liquid? That is because of the concept called relaxation time of a material. That is, every material has a time that it takes for it to come back to its initial state from a deformation. That's called relaxation time of a material. That is the time taken by the material to come back to its initial state after a deformation is removed. Now, if the time scale of your experiment is comparable or less or greater to this time scale of relaxation, you would basically see one or more of the responses. That is what is scientifically defined as a Deborah number, which is a ratio of material's relaxation time to your observation time, which is also a ratio of elastic forces to viscous forces, and I'll tell you how. Now, let's take the case of the silly putty, which is in the form of a ball. And when I throw the ball, this entire process happens in fraction of a second. And therefore, your time scale of observation is very small as compared to the material's relaxation time, which would mean that in your time scale of observation, the material has responded like an elastic solid. While in this case, your time scale of observation is very large, like a few days or hours. And therefore, you basically let the material sit and flow and behave like a viscous material. So essentially, the time scale of experiment that you have is your main key to tuning materials properties. So if you take a viscoelastic system and based on your time scale of observation, you can either get an elastic or a viscous like behavior. Now this figure that you see is basically what you see when you throw stone in water. I hope everybody has seen that when you throw stone on water in a very faster rate, you see that it basically bounces. It has these cripples, and this is because your throwing time scale is very small or your observation time is very small. The stone basically falls on to a solid like system. I hope this is clear. But again, if you drop a stone very slowly, it basically sinks in water, because in that time scale of observation, the material basically is like water. So the key to understanding systems is to actually compare their relaxation times to your time scale of observation or experiment. So I hope this is clear. And now, what contributes to this complex viscoelastic behavior that I'm talking about? You have materials that can have different kinds of structures, and this particular slide is a proof of that. Now, let us take the case of polymeric systems. When I mean polymeric systems, you can also consider polysaccharides that are there in human body. Like, for example, there is a polysaccharide called hyaluronic acid, which is in the human eye. And I think everyone's familiar to that, which also has a complex structure like this. Or take, for example, polymeric mills that are made used for making chairs and everything else that you see in everyday life. So essentially, polymer mills are understood as chunks of chains like this, which can be entangled. And when you subject them to deformation, these chains basically relax and extend and align in the direction of flow. And this kind of a change that you see in structure during deformation can actually be utilized to understand what was the structure and what are the structural changes. And based on this, you can tune them for whatever applications that you are interested in. Now let's take the case of suspensions, which most of you are familiar with. We know that suspensions have particles suspended in them, and these particles are also of a comparatively greater size, and most of these are aggregated. When you subject them to deformation, you would see that these aggregates break, and therefore you would see, let's say, viscosity decreasing or any other material property changing. So the material property changes during deformation, which gives you a clue on how the structure changes during deformation. So similar are other structures such as emulsions, which are basically two-phase liquid systems, and also dispersions that align in the direction of flow. And then there are these important structures that I'm going to talk about on the right side. which are cross-linked polymers. And why are these important is because most of our materials are cross-linked polymers. The tablets that you eat, the or the polymers that you use, some of the clothes that you wear, all the jackets that you have, all of them are in one or the other form cross-linked polymers, and therefore these structures are even more important. And actually, my one of my research topics was to actually understand these structures in detail. So what you would see is that you can either have polymers that are physically cross-linked, that is the ones that can have weak interactions in them, and because of that, these particular bonds can break and reform easily. That is, these bonds are reversible, unlike the case for a covalently cross-linked system, and that's what you're seeing here. So these two, because they have different structures, although they belong to the family of cross-linked polymers, based on the type of cross-linking that they can have different structural changes during deformation, and therefore different material properties during deformation. Similarly, are these gels that you have, colloidal gels. All your creams, all your cosmetics are basically colloidal gels. What you would see is that particles that interact, they percolate to form such structures. And during deformation, these structures break. And so there is some energy dissipation, and this can lead to some kind of material property change in the system. So if you look at all these complex systems that I'm talking about, what you would see is that they have a primary structure in them, which is molecular level. For example, in the case of a colloidal gel, you can have interactions between two molecules as a primary structure, and a secondary structure is 3-4 such particles forming a network or chain or and etc. And this entire macromolecular structure that you see is a tertiary structure. So, because it has different levels of structure in the system, it can have different timescales of response. I hope this is clear to people. If anybody doesn't understand this concept, get back to me during the question and answer session. Okay, so the most complex system can have different levels of structure in it, and because of having these levels of structure, each of these can interact in different time scales. So you'll have a very complex response coming out of such a system, and decoding such complex response will give you route to understanding these structures. And also understanding these structures is important because for particular applications you need that these structures should be a particular way and have particular properties. So at the end of the day, microstructure is what dictates the behavior or the application that you're looking at. Now, this last particular figure that you see is actually red blood cells in blood. Usually, we just earlier in our BTech first year, we used to think blood is Newtonian fluid. By the end of our BTech, we think, oh no, it is much more than that. It is like a Bingham fluid. But actually, blood is not even a Bingham fluid. It is actually a viscoelastic system, because RBCs are known to form these kind of aggregated structures, which are called as Rolex. And as and when you shear, you see that these Rolex undergo different kinds of rearrangements and finally break down. And all these changes that you see will reflect in their material properties, and essentially that will help you understand these structures. So this is where I think I'll end my talk, saying that uh, it is essential for you to look at the time scales of your observation versus time scale of response, and also the extent of deformation. That's the y axis. Okay, so this one particular figure will basically tell you that as you go further in time scale, you actually go from a Newtonian fluid to a linear elastic system. And as you go further in deformation scales, you either are only deforming Newtonian fluids or only deforming elastic systems. But then there is this complex domain, which is what is the real world. And therefore, you need some complex flows and different ways of probing such systems. So therefore, with all this introduction that I've given, I think everybody can convince themselves on the fact that even mountains can flow before the Lord. Because let us assume Lord is a dimension who looks at things in a light year scale, and that's a very large time scale compared to the system, and therefore mountains appear like viscous fluids. And similar is the case with geologists. So geologists always model Earth as a Newtonian fluid, which sounds ridiculous for us. But then if you look at time scales as large as light years, Earth also essentially is like a Newtonian fluid. And therefore, in my opinion, if you are looking at things at certain right time scales, every material appears to flow. And then there is a philosophical perspective to it. So let us take the same Deborah number and let us define it this way. Let us say Deborah number is a ratio of time scale of occurrence of an event to your time scale of observation. Let's say if the material system is basically your life and the event is either a pandemic or a failure, let us take the case of a pandemic. So if the event is a pandemic and if your time scale of observation is large, which means if you're looking in future into all these events and reflect upon, what you would see is that the time scale of occurrence of a pandemic is very small. And so you would essentially see that the life eventually flows, which means you have overcome all these negativities and moved on. And same is the case with your failures in life. So therefore your life also flows. So that is why everything flows. So that is the end of my talk. I can take some questions here. I hope most of my talk is clear, but please let me
Yeah,
know if it's not.
yeah, you have nicely touched on the pandemic also, huh?
Yes, sir.
That's very nice. So you can finish the other part also,
Yeah, okay.
probably so that together people can ask questions on all. So your
Yeah.
next slide, I could see that it is on
Yeah, so here I
higher
increased the font.
studies.
Yeah, on higher studies. Okay, so what I tried to do was to look at what are the options available post your BTech in India. So you can either take up an integrated MS PhD like me if you're interested in research, or if you are not sure if you're interested in research and want to know what is that field that appeals to you, you can always go for a master's, either a MTech or an MS. What I've seen lately is that most people who take MTech are usually aligned towards taking up industrial jobs, while people who take up MS are aligned towards trying to understand what is it that they like and what is it that they want to research on. So they do an MS in India and let's say go for a PhD either in India or abroad, uh, and work under profs who are really good in their fields, irrespective of where they go. And then the other two options are, if you are not sure about taking up a master's, but you really want to take some time out there, like for example, the case with Akash Raman that sir was talking about. So what he did was while he was applying for positions and trying to figure out some best options in his life, he also worked as a project associate in IIT. So what you do as a project associate is you get to work on a small project that you want to complete, publish, and then you can probably think on some potential problems that you want to work on, and then that will give you an understanding of who you want to work under and all of that. And I think similar is the case with a junior research fellow as well. And both of all these four come with stipends, which are very economic as per Indian standards. Yeah. Now let me compare and contrast a master's in MTech versus MS in India. So, okay, so the Master of Science degree that you get in India is always research oriented, by the way. So, I don't think I have to put this research all the time. But yeah. So, MTech is offered by most IITs. I think all new IITs also, NITs, and there are also triple IITs. And why I mentioned triple IITs here is because there's also a lot of computational work that people do in chemical engineering, and triple IITs are also one good institutes where they do a lot of good computational work. Then other options are BITS, and you always have central and state government universities as well. For example, Anna University is also, I heard, is very good with masters. ICT, where many of my batchmates also studied, is very good in chemical engineering. Uh, while masters, on the other hand, I think MS by research is offered by comparatively fewer IITs and NITs. And if you're planning of masters, I would always suggest you to take up IITs as option, because at least they have a very concrete plan for what an MS research should look like. And you're always in collaboration with a PhD student. And sometimes you also get to go for semester abroads. You also get to collaborate with the profs from other IITs or other CSIR labs. So I would suggest MS by research if you want to do in India. I would suggest you to take up IITs. And for all of these, you need to qualify GATE. And even otherwise, I would suggest you write GATE and qualify, because that's very important for you to have a self check on your technical content, and also for you to have a self check on competitiveness, because at the end of the day, it's a competitive exam also. So yeah. Okay, so the main difference between MTech and MS would be that MTech is completely coursework and you won't have much time for project, but there are also students who've done a lot of good work during their last semesters in project. while research is completely research based, MS by research, and so you have comparatively fewer courses, and mostly it's project based. MTech is time bound, strictly 2 years, while MS you can actually get an extension of 1 year more. Because it's research, you can always not have a time bound for research. It usually can arise into a bigger interesting problem and you would want to solve. So yeah. And yeah, both of these get similar stipend, but one advantage is that an MTech student, if he wants to go for a conference abroad or conference in India, it's comparatively difficult for them to get some monetary assistance. While MS, at least in IITs, they get compulsory 1 year one conference funding from the institute. So that way, probably it's easier for them. And in all of these advantages, let's say you're very sure by the end of your masters that yes, this is a field I love and this is a field I want to do a PhD in. You can always convert to a PhD. And yeah, and then you have two things which are very similar. One is where you can do a direct PhD, like me and some of my friends, where you get a master's and a PhD in a total of 4 to 5 years. I personally took 5 years because I had one and a half full years of coursework. I couldn't do research at all, and then half year of figuring out my potential problems. So essentially, I had 3 years of research to do. So therefore, it took me 5 years. So it takes usually 5 years. Let's say that's like the minimum that people take. Yeah. And this direct PhD or integrate PhD is actually offered by comparatively lesser institutes in the country. Um, and here also admission is through GATE. You also have an interview, but that interview would mostly be related to your technical expertise in chemical engineering. And then yeah, so if you're a direct PhD or integrated PhD, IIT that I know of, the main IITs at least they give you funding for 2 conferences that you can attend abroad, and a lot of conferences in India. So as you can see that uh, this is a very good opportunity, because the more you go for your conferences, the more insights you get on your work, and the more contacts that you get. You also get to know of what other facilities are there with somebody else that's not with you, and you can go and collaborate with them. So that's there. And also you can go for semester abroads and collaborations, which I'll get back to in my last slide. And then also this is a very the last point is very important, that although you do a lot of fundamental research, I believe that at the end of the day, every work that you do has a very good industrial application to it, and therefore there'll be a lot of Indian industries who seek for your assistance. This I am telling you from the point of view of being there. Many of these people have assumptions that probably Indian industries don't do a lot of active R&D, but that's not true. You actually get a lot of very good challenging industrial projects, and as a PhD student you get to dabble in all of this. And same goes with the regular on Excel. So this is for students who have completed their masters. So this may be a long shot for you, but I'll still give you a overview of this. A regular PhD, I think, has a lot more options when it comes to choosing the institute. And here I want to stress on CSIR labs. They are very good when it comes to, let's say, applied work as well as experimental work. And then you also have JNCSR, which is a very good research institute in Bangalore. I would want all of you to actually go and check their research programs, which are also very good. And then there is IMSC. IMSC is Indian Mathematical Science Institute in Chennai. They do a lot of computational work in chemical engineering. And then we always have TFR labs, and we also have institutes like ICT, which do a very good research. And this is also similar. These people usually take 4 to 5 years. And see, the advantage of doing a direct PhD over a regular PhD is that in a regular PhD, hello, hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, it is
Yeah,
audible. Yeah,
yeah,
continue.
okay, fine. So in a regular PhD, I've seen people taking 4 to 5 years, which is like they do 2 years of masters plus 4 years of their PhD. While if you do a direct PhD, the advantage is that your master's and PhD is done in 4 years, 4 or 5 years, which saves you some time, because then you would get to do some post doctoral works if you're interested in academia, or it will also let you jabble across different industries to basically know which is the right industry you fit in. So you get a lot of age, if that's the right word to put in. Yeah. So you get a lot of time when you do a direct PhD. So that is something that I would suggest to people, but don't do it until you're very sure of whether you want to do research. So that's there. Yeah, and rest everything is very similar. And collaborative opportunities. So in this, I'm sure everybody already knows that because people from our institute already go for that. Other than that, there is Fulbright Fellowship, which lets you spend 1 year on a collaborative project in a university in US. And then there is something called Raman Charbak Fellowship, which is an Indo-French fellowship. And this you can get to work for 2 to 6 months of duration in France. And then also a lot of IITs and IICs have good MOUs with different overseas institutes. So you're always welcome to collaborate and go work in other labs, not just part of our country but also abroad. And then there is something called Prime Minister Fellowship, which is actually very important. This is a very this is a very recent initiative by our country. One of my batchmates from Shastra was also my classmate in IITM. Her name is Piyali Dhar, and so she actually worked on a Prime Minister Fellowship. So she had her work in industry-based problems, and therefore she basically wrote up an abstract in partnership with an industry, and she got 4 to 5 years of funding to basically work on her research area. So that's also very good. And actually, the only difference in Prime Minister Fellowship is that you get a lot of money, and that money is actually very good for you to, let's say, have even ask for facilities for your lab apart from what your faculty can get for you. And then finally, yeah, you also have individual project fundings coming from the faculty. Something that I forgot to put here is by the end of your PhD, whether it's in India or abroad, you also come up with a lot of ideas. So you would eventually want to write a proposals and get funding to work on those. That is something that also you should look at. I mean, as far as I know, few professors in India have that policy that by the end of your PhD, you write up a proposal. So that would basically get you ready for academia, and that's also something which is very important because more than sincerely working on a topic that somebody has prescribed for you, it is essential for you to find out key problems in your area or in your areas of interest and work on them. So basically that is also possible with regard it's possible anywhere in, I think, but then yeah, that's something that I was planning to mention. So yes, so that's the part of it. I'm done with this also, and then we can take some questions now.
Yeah. So Ramya, that's fantastic. So you
Yeah,
have covered almost what a PhD will look like in 4 years.
4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So anybody wants to ask questions, you can just type. In the meantime, I'll just ask the first question so that people can type by that time.
Yeah.
I'll ask a question on how to keep your experience on the mindset during PhD, especially during research, because many of the times we do experiments. The experiments may go for weeks, months. The results will.
Right. Hello, sir. Hello, sir. I can't hear you. Hello, sir. I can't hear you. Hello. 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 Okay, great. I thought I had net issues. Sorry, I got scared. Okay, I think I understood what Naren sir was asking. I think this is something that my batchmate Sudarshan will also probably help me to speak on.
Expected it. The results could be.
Yeah. Sir, again you'll have to meet. Okay. Hello. Okay, so probably shall I wait for him to come back or shall I speak? He's come back.
I don't know what Naren sir was saying. I couldn't hear
Yeah.
at all.
Hello.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
Yeah. So yeah. So others can text your questions in the chat box. Okay. So by the time I'll just ask the first question. So some questions let it populate. So where I left is Ramya. So many a times when we do experiments, we might be doing experiments for months probably,
Right.
but
Right.
probably the result will not come like what we expected. Or probably after 2 months we will come to know that the path we have taken for experimentation is wrong, and we have to redo it probably after 2 months. So there will be some very low periods where experiments don't come, but
Right.
the guide will want experiments, or the funding agency wants results, or probably somebody else wants positive results.
Right.
But it is not possible to get just like that in a day.
Right.
So how did you face the situation? Can you just share something so that people who want to take up higher studies can prepare their mindsets? In the meantime, others can put their questions in the chat box.
Chat box. Yeah. Okay. So that is a question that I was actually expecting. Okay. From at least. Okay. So my point of view on this would be that I thought pursuing PhD would be like I'll have so many research problems to work on and I'll just work on that. But it is more of a personality development as well, because like Naren sir said, there will be all these issues where you might have time management issues. You might most of the time it would end up that your experiments may go wrong, or at least sometimes you do some modeling and a very critical parameter may be wrong. Okay, so what I did during this process is first I was actually depressed. I did cry, but then I started doing a lot of yoga and meditation, which is very important to keep your mental peace. On the second, this thing is that so PhD during PhD, I would want everybody to work on every day based on a plan. Nothing can happen overnight, and also it is essential for you to have a very good communication with the person that you're working with to convince them that why something did not work, and you need certain
Hello. I think Ramya left by accident. I think she will join. I'm audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, Ramya, have you joined? I think her net broke or something. She will join, I think. Yeah, I think she joined. Ramya, you can continue. Ramya, you can unmute. You should unmute and then continue.
Okay, so can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
continue.
Okay. Okay. So the first thing is somewhere or the other, you need to keep yourself. You need to convince yourself that this is a research problem that you are interested in working on, and you shouldn't be looking at results that just come in a day or two. You should be looking at what is the end result of it and work towards that. When you do that, you basically won't be disappointed with the little failures or the little changes that you have to make. So always think on completing a problem to the fullest extent possible than completing just the mini problems, and then if they don't work you can't just be like I'm mood off today, I can't work. It doesn't work that way. Also, let's there are some of I think some of you would also be I was like that, so I think there will be some people who will relate to that, that if let's say you start a small problem, until you finish the problem you always sit with it, and then you basically throw every other item from your schedule off chart, which is also not a I think not a right way of working, because you try to put some in your best into something. Let's say that does not work, you can always keep that work aside and look at the other topics that might be interesting to work on. Start working on them, and while you're working on them you will obviously notice that you will get an idea for the other work too. So it's like always keep more avenues of research problem open, and then finish them as and when you get ideas. I think that's also one way of working with it. Yeah, so this is what.
Yeah, you can see
I
the
think
questions on the chat.
I think I can add some point to this, Ramya.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm struggling.
like I can relate. I can relate very much what Naren sir was saying. Like he
Mm.
put it on like in terms of experiment, but I can relate this to simulations anyway. So I have also got many days where I'd been lonely, and like after a month, I came to realize that, oh my god, there is a minus missing in my code, and
Mm.
the one way to come out of it could be also can go and talk with your colleagues, like chat with them, discuss your problem. And you might in the end have a good idea where the problem went, and yeah, that can be another solution. If you're like sometimes down, just go and have a chat with them, discuss your problem, and yeah, that'll be a good way to get out of it, actually. So I actually did this, in
Yeah,
fact,
Yeah, good.
when I was having problems.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, so this is what, this is also true. What Sudarshan said was, at the end of the day, research has to be collaborative and not just research. Also, you can always share sometimes your state of mind with some of your colleagues in terms of uh, why something is not working, and you should always be open to interacting with peers, because sometimes some small issues that you will not see, your friend basically can, because he comes from a different like different mood or a different part of the day, he can basically read through your code, or just look at your experimental protocol, and he or she might find that error in your setup that you may not be looking at. So yeah, like Sudarshan said, interacting with peers is very important. Yeah.
Yeah, you can go to the questions in the chat box.
Sir, actually, I am sorry. I only
Okay.
have your this thing because I didn't
Okay, so you take that question, the other two I will post it.
Okay, great. So
Okay,
that
I will.
that
I'll post it. You take my question on the chat. The other two questions I'll post it.
so this is what I just spoke on. Like you have to talk
Okay.
to your lab colleagues, neighbor labs. Yes. Yeah, that's true. And another thing that I've also, I think, experienced is, see, I am somebody who does semi-experimental, semi-modeling work, while on the other hand, Sudarshan may be completely simulation person. Uh, when that is the case, I think if let's say one or two of you were interested in some computational work, right? I would always suggest you to interact with experimentalists as well, because sometimes you get a lot of your ideas from there, a lot of their inputs for your work, which is very helpful as well. Yeah. Okay, so what is this? I have a
Yeah,
doubt.
there are two people's questions which was earlier available. I have posted one of Rajashri and Lokesh. So you
Right.
can read Rajashri's answer and then go to Lokesh. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So Rajashri asks, I have a doubt. In finding Deborah number, you used observation time. Shouldn't we consider impact time in that case? I think observation time and impact time in case of throwing silly putty is different. Can you please throw some light on it? Okay. Actually, what I mean by observation time is the time duration at which this entire process of the ball hitting the ground happens. So it's basically, as you stated, the impact time is what I meant by observation time. And yeah, in some cases you may not do a good thorough observation in terms of, let's say, there will be experimental errors. Um, so yes, based on, but I'm sure that's not much. I mean, there's not much of an error in that when it comes to that. So when I mean observation time, I mean the experimental time, and here the experiment is throwing the silly putty ball on the ground. So that is what it means when I mean experimental time. I hope that question's clear. Is it?
Yeah, you can go to the next.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and then could you elaborate more on a project associateship? Okay, so this, okay, Logesh, some departments need gates, some departments do not. So I am not sure if that is, but I can tell you, IIT Madras, you can join as a project associate immediately after your bachelor's, and you need not have a gate score. So yeah, that's possible. That's obviously possible. But even if you let's say prepare, and let's say you do not clear for the first time, you can always attempt it again. Gate, you just keep attempting it. That's fine. That shouldn't be a problem. But yeah, there are always a lot of project associations that you can get in the country without gate. Yeah, I think, but it is always good for you to have done some work during your BTech in Shastra or somewhere outside. They always see that as to how inclined the student is towards research. So that may be why they select you. That's it. Okay, understanding versus grades. What is your take or reflection? Okay, so this is a very good question, Naren sir. Actually, so Naren sir asks me. I think everybody can read the chat, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So understanding versus grades. To be very honest, I think I've changed as a person in this perspective. I think during my BTech, when I started off, I would think that okay, because I want good grades, I would study, and because I'm studying, I would want to understand. So I thought they're similar, but need not necessarily be. Um, but that does not mean you don't focus on your grades. But at the end of the day, grades or CGPA will not tell you how much is your understanding of a field or how much is your passion for something, to be very honest. But it's always good to have good grades because that goes into your resume, and it's the resume that at the end of the day shortlists you for something. So yes. But again, just because you are a topper, that does not mean you are great at it. There are also a lot of people who are very good at it. So yeah. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like for
Next.
example, maybe I can also I never said this, but I can also say. So there was one student in our batch, Hari Kishan. He was into nanotechnology, if I'm right, during his bachelor's, and I think he had a very good understanding in that field as opposed to general chemical engineering. So you never know. CGPA doesn't really matter. I mean, you didn't have a nanotechnology course itself during BTech. So what will you grade that person on? So yeah, understanding has nothing to completely do with grades. But yeah,
Yeah.
having good grades is always good.
There's a questions. Yeah.
Huh. Any other question?
Yeah, it is there in the chat box.
Oh, yeah, there are a lot of questions. Akka, I am LR Vignesh, a second year graduate. We have polymer science and technologies an elective, and a decent number of students have attended it. Yet the motive for pursuing is not very compelling despite completing the course. Could you shed some light on the futuristic scope of work on polymers? Okay, Vignesh, I think instead of saying polymers, I want to say biopolymers because biopolymers are right now the boom of the day. Everybody wants to have polymers that can be degraded easily. And if you say polymers, right now, a lot of work is going on recycling as well as trying to make sure that these polymers are somehow disposable. So that is where a lot of work is going on. So the futuristic scope of work on polymers is that you have a lot of junk polymers, so you need to recycle them. You need to make sure that they are somehow disposed. So as you can see, a lot of polymer pollution is there everywhere, and therefore I think that's like one of the topmost fields you can work on because there are a lot of problems that you can solve or work on. Yeah. So I think that's what it is. On the other hand, the polymer science and technology course may not tell you. Probably would have taught you more about polymers, how you understand, how you prepare them, and all of that. But it is. And another, yeah, there's something also called a self-healing polymers technology. Like there are some phones that come with back covers which can heal themselves. So that is also a very good field to work on. I hope everybody is familiar with self-healing polymers. So yeah, so all of these are the scopes of polymers. Yeah, so it's like a very good field to work on. And on the other hand, maybe this is also something that I should talk upon. So I had one collaborator in Reliance. He's working on trying to find a method to dispose of polymers, and they have come up with idea of using these polymers that cannot be degraded as adhesive materials for road making systems, which is actually being happening. It's happening right now. So as you can see, if you cannot completely find out technologies to dispose them, try and use them in some other applications that can be relevant for them. So you can also have alternate technologies wherein your polymers can be applicable. So there's a lot of scope that way. So I think I've convinced. Okay, so next is Sudarshan. Did you actually do experiments with viscoelastic fluids? How did you actually measure the rheology? I mean, there are so many parameters to vary, right? Yes. So I wouldn't say viscoelastic fluids. I worked on different kinds of structures, and I observed that the different kinds of structures that I worked with have not just viscoelasticity but much more complex behavior. I measure them. Yes. So there are two ways of doing it. So there is an equipment called rheometer that actually uh, uh, gives deformations to systems in a very planned protocol. And during deformations, you can also look at microstructure using microscopy or light scattering. That way, you basically can also understand how these structures change during deformation, not just in terms of metal properties, but in terms of some visual appeal. And like you said, yes, there are so many parameters. So this is, I think, the case with most research problems. I mean, there are always many parameters to vary. But yes, there are a lot of assumptions. So that maybe, Sudarshan, what I can do is I can give you the link for my defense, and I want you to be there so I can tell you how I did all of that.
Yeah, sure, do.
In a way, I just want to tell Ramya and Sudarshan, you are on the two sides of the same problem. So I think
Yes.
Ramya is more of an experimentalist, and Sudarshan
Yeah.
tries to build that experiments from mathematics,
Yeah.
seeing in computer. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
to the others who are listening this talk, Sudarshan is actually also working on solid suspension rheology, but completely on mathematics.
Mathematics. Yeah.
And Ramya is trying to measure everything by
Yeah.
nature. Right. Yeah, you can go to the
Yeah.
next question.
Okay, and can you say anything on how about taking food technology as higher education? Oh, yes, thank you so much for asking this question because I didn't touch on food. Okay, so in rheology itself, the field currently has come up to a stage where people are looking at interesting structures, interesting materials, and food is one of them because a lot of people want to give some measures when it comes to talking about how good a food is. So in this aspect, there is a new. So everybody wants to turn right now vegan and all of that, right? So there are meat alternatives that people are coming up. Let's, for example, soya chunks or some multi-phase systems that can be very similar to these meat systems. So yes, there is a lot of understanding of structure of these systems happening. There's also a lot of deformation related work that's happening in food. So when you mean food technology, you can always look at all of these as well. Like food at the end of the day are also polysaccharides. So they are like biopolymeric systems. And one more thing is, what I can tell you about is to understand how in thin gaps these systems work. Like for example, you want to eat chips, you want to talk about crispiness of a chips, or let's say chocolate. When you're eating chocolate, you don't want chocolate to go between your teeth. So all these are at the end of the day some measurement of their solid-like or their liquid-like properties. So yes, so food technology and a lot of rheology as well as structure understanding is happening in terms of food technology as well. So yeah, that's a very good. I would say I would go for it if given a chance. From your experience of friends from IITM, how is job prospect in industry for people after core other than PhD? Okay, so this is something that is very. I'm not sure if I have a concrete answer to it because I have seen actually many of them getting the core jobs.
Yeah, no, this is because
Huh.
especially people might have a concern is what I will do after my MS or MTech.
True, true.
Okay, should I
Right.
only do PhD? So
Mm.
I just want to give your opinion so that it is
Right.
very good for the current students. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, okay. So going to industry, I would say, I don't know. This is with some assumption. I think during your bachelor's, somewhere or the other, you at least get to do research in labs, so you have an understanding of how research is. But I'm not sure how much of an experience in terms of industry you get from your bachelor's, because all we do is go for implant trainings. But in implant trainings, it's mostly they teach you, and I'm not sure if they let you do all these controls and all of that. So going to an industry would be something that you want to do if you want to understand how practically everything happens. Let's say, for example, you read a lot of process control, but you have no clue how it is done, and so you get to learn a lot of things in industry. But yeah, so it really depends on. I'm not sure how to answer that one, because there are a lot of prospects in industry. Gate is one of them. You write gate, you get public sector universities. Campus placements, yes, is one of them. Um, and other than that, during PhD also, I have known students who are actually working in industries and doing an external PhD in collaboration with IITM or different institutes. So that's also possible. Like, you go to industry, let's say, and you want to do, let's say, some research based work in IITs. Fundamental part of it, you can do it in an academic institute, and the application part of it can be done in industry. So we have some collaborators like that, who are like hardcore industrialists, but they also have this research aspect to them by doing these external PhDs, or external masters also is possible in IITM, by the way.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
If some elective course is to be introduced at UG for Shastra, what will be your take? I think Shastra has good electives, but okay. So something that I think I want to think about is, sir, more of computational, sir, because nowadays a lot of computational work is happening. And like, for example, CFD is something that you already do, but apart from that, there's a lot of lattice Boltzmann kinds of simulations, like some other different kinds of continuum analysis tools that are there. So some recent addition to these can be added. And another thing is, okay, so this is something that I never touched upon. There is something called as molecular dynamics that you can do, DFT and all of that, which Abhinav actually presented on. I think such courses can be included, where you use something called as Monte Carlo, or you do some molecular dynamic simulations to understand and see how molecules are interacting and forming structures and all of that. So yes, I would say molecular dynamics kind of courses can be added.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is
Fair
something.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that if I introduce LBM, Sudarshan can come and teach
Come
guest
in.
lecture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think molecular dynamics should be very easy for students in terms of BTech level. I think during
Yeah.
BTech, they'll already have good amount of math and good amount of fluid mechanics in mind. So I think starting off with MD would be also great. Yes. Okay. Another thing that I think I have to touch upon is this. I'm not sure how good I am at convincing people if this course is required. I think artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks in chemical engineering is also something that's being done. So this is for that student who was interested in computer science and IT, who
Yeah.
wanted to mix. Yeah. So there's neural networks for process control that's being done. Yeah. So these are the
Okay.
courses in mind. Yeah.
Good. So any other questions? So we are close to an hour. So yeah, there is a question.
How parsimonious or how accommodating a mathematical model should be when it is based on experimental data. Okay, so this one Sudarshan should answer completely, but yes, okay, I'll tell you. This is exactly this was the motivation behind my work as well, because I had a lot of experimental data to begin with already, because there's a lot of experiments that were done in lab. So my idea was to actually build a mathematical model that is as descriptive of the experimental system as possible. So, and that is why um, but then you have to also compromise on so many things, because when you're talking about mathematical model, there are let's say if you're talking about, let's say, structure, and you want to make a model based on the structure that is there, you need to think on what are the important ones when it comes to, or the what level of structure are you addressing it. Let's say if you're addressing at a molecular level structure, then all these molecular level information, such as molecular weights, or what is the atomic number, all of that would be important. But when you're looking at a macro level structure, let's say what we do in rheology, we have a very macro level structure or a continuum level structure, then you can basically make response based modeling and not depend very much on the molecular level. So yeah, as you say, the model that is the best accommodating is would be probably the best model, but that is really a dream for most of them. Yeah.
Yeah, Sudarshan, you want to tell anything?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing you do is, let's say you have a model that you developed, you've written the code. To make sure your code works, you first have to validate the code, right?
Right.
There are I mean, for example, my case, I have particles. So first thing I have to do is I have to validate my code, showing that my code is actually works with what people have done in the past. Like, for example, one particle in a system, or like how two particles move in a system. So if your code is able to replicate and reproduce what others have done, you can use that as a, I mean, like if that is done, then it's okay. Then you can say that, well, if I'm having more particles in it, okay, fine, my code is going to work really well. So the first thing is validation. Make sure that there is no mistake or whatever you have developed, it's correct. So if that is clear, then you can assume that in a bigger picture, whatever you're trying to develop is going to be correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So, any other question?
Any other question?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if there are any questions. I think okay. So maybe I will first ask Sudarshan itself to tell how was Sudarshan. How is your classmate today?
Sudarshan, did I confuse a lot of people?
No, no.
Sudarshan will tell, yes, sir, because he is your batchmate, but this is recording, so Sudarshan
No, I
will
think
tell.
Sudarshan already knows more than what I have presented today. I thought I'll just keep it introduction level and not go into my.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sudarshan,
I completely
so you can
appreciate that.
probably tell what is your classmate today. Yeah,
Yeah, sure,
Sudarshan.
definitely.
Yeah. Sudarshan, feedback.
It's
You can text me your feedbacks. Maybe I can work on
No,
that.
he will talk. Those feedback he can text, but let
Yeah.
Sudarshan talk.
Sure. Yeah.
Sudarshan talk.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Ramya. It was really informative, and it's good that you kept it in a very simple way to so that it reaches to everybody, and that's a really good point. Well, if you had all the equations in your slides, then it would blow the mind. So it's good that you maintained that level of simplicity. So it's very that's a good point. And what I observe is so Ramya, what I saw 6 years back is the same Ramya. It's the same
Oh,
Ramya even now.
in terms of what? In terms of how I look, or in terms of how I
No.
am?
In terms of how you were before and also now,
Oh,
like I mean, I mean, like the level of dedication. I mean, the way
dedication.
you talk, everything is the same. Like you haven't changed at all, even a little bit. So that's really so good. And actually all the best for your defense
Thank you.
in the future. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I would actually like to be in your defense if that will be live streamed or whatever. uh,
Right.
yeah, sure. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Thank you.
so
I'll give
thank
it.
you, Sudarshan. So, anybody from the present students who wants to talk?
Hello,
Yeah.
am I audible? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, Akka. I'm Adingi from final year chemical engineering.
Madangi.
First, yeah, thank you, Akka, for coming forward and giving this talk because I always wanted someone to speak about the higher studies in India. You gave a clear explanation about differences between an MTech and an MS program, and also about integrated PhD and all of that. It was really useful for me, and also about the first part of the talk, it was really interesting. So once
Oh,
again, thank you, Akka.
that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. The first part of the talk is interesting. Okay. Okay. So what I'll again do is I'll quickly screen my email ID and number. if there are people who are interested to note it down, you can.
Yeah, but
note
I think that will be there in the email. I have
Email.
put your
Yeah,
email
that's
because this will go
yeah.
on public. So
Okay.
let's not put that,
Oh yeah.
right?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think in the invitation email, I have already
Hmm.
CC'd you. So I
Yeah,
think people can see that
Okay.
your email ID there.
Great. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I can
So
see.
anybody else who wants to speak? Yeah.
Can I call Sir Rajashri?
Yeah, Rajashri, yes. Yes, you can.
Thanks for this informative. It was very interesting and it was so useful for many of us. And in the beginning, you about the viscoelastic fluid, it was so informative, and you made a small connection between the flow behavior and the life itself.
Thank you.
I felt it so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. And about MTech, MS, and PhD, all the information you gave was so useful,
Hmm.
and it made me clear about what I want to do in future. And I think many of us clarity what we have to do after BTech. Thank you
Nice.
so much
Thank
for
you.
coming and sharing all the details. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, okay. And I think I just want to add one more point. I think Sudarshan also will be with me on this. That don't get into a PhD thinking that you just like the field. It's like you're going into something that needs utmost dedication for some time, or the 4 5 years of this thing, because you can't, like, I know there are some of them during BTech who are like, we'll study at the last moment, we'll score, we'll get done with it, we'll just listen to sir's class, we'll get all the concepts and just get done with it. But that's not how a PhD is. You need to have some regular working, you have to keep working regularly, also have a very balanced personal life, because I wasn't like that when I started off with. I used to always work, and then slowly I understood that there's a lot of personal time that's also important. So you need to keep in mind all of that. So before you take a PhD, I would suggest you guys to interact with 2 3 other senior PhD students in the same field, in the same lab, and then come to a conclusion on whether that environment is right for you, because that's also important at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think you build the interest slowly.
Yeah.
It's not like even though when you like the subject, it's not like it'll be. There
True.
are so many hurdles, right? So you build the interest day by day. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
So there is one more person from your batch. I don't know whether she can speak. Niveda?
Yeah, I just saw that. Niveda, yeah.
sir.
Yeah, you can speak. Now this is on record, so you can speak of your
Oh,
classmate. This is recording now.
Yeah, I remember that. But no, I only have nice things to say. Why would you give me that warning, sir? But hi, Ramya. That was a great talk.
Hi. Thank
Seriously.
you, Nivi.
And it's nice to see what people are doing after so many years of yapping away in class together. So yeah, about Ramya, I mean, like I agree with what Sudarshan said. I wasn't surprised with anything in the presentation. You're pretty much the same person you were back when we were in Shastra, and there's just a couple of things. One of those, and I mean, Narendra was spot on to ask you a question about grades versus understanding, because you're one of those people that never said, okay, I don't need to understand this, I just need to score. And believe me, there were a lot of us that said that at some point. So yeah, that was your passion and fascination for what you do clearly came through in your presentation as well. And also, like, another thing I think a lot of people who knew our batch would agree with is that you were one of those people that never succumbed to any kind of peer pressure and was always very honest about what you wanted to do. So I'm glad that you like what you're doing, and it's great to see you working on something so that you're so passionate about. And
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for that. It was great listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. So
somebody said hi.
Any other comments? If there are okay.
Yeah.
So if there are no other comments, yeah, very good. Thanks, Ramya. It's a nice thing. I also got at least 3 videos which I can now include as part of fluid mechanics, so that to make it known that the fluid mechanics does not stop only in the fourth semester. There is much more to look into that fluid mechanics.
Sure.
So that's something I can definitely do as a takeaway after this presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all, and thanks, Ramya, for this talk.
Thank you all for listening to me so patiently. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I hope this will clear so many things for so many people. And all the best to you all. May you choose the right field for you and do the best that you can. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. See you. Bye.
Bye, sir. Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.